Chapter 4. The dogs loved Sarah first. Lottie slept beside her bed, curled in a soft circle, and Nick leaned his face on the covers in the morning, watching for the first sign that Sarah was awake. No one knew where Seal slept. Seal was a roamer. Sarah's collection of shells sat on the windowsill. "A scallop," she told us, picking up the shells one by one. "A sea clam, an oyster, a razor clam, and a conch shell. If you put it to your ear, you can hear the sea." She put it to Caleb's ear, then mine. Papa listened too. Then Sarah listened once more with a sad, so sad, and far away look that Caleb leaned against me. "At least Sarah can hear the sea," he whispered. Papa was quiet and shy with Sarah, and so was I. But Caleb talked to Sarah from morning until the light left the sky. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To do what?" "To pick flowers," said Sarah. "I'll hang some of them upside down and dry them so they'll keep some color, and we can have flowers all winter long." "I'll come too," cried Caleb. Sarah said, "Winter." He said to me, "That means Sarah will stay." Together we picked flowers, paintbrush and clover and prairie violets. There were buds on the wild roses that climbed up the paddock fence. "The roses will bloom in early summer," I told Sarah. I looked to see if she knew what I was thinking. Summer was when the wedding would be. Might be. Sarah and Papa's wedding. We hung the flowers from the ceiling in little bunches. "I've never seen this before," said Sarah. "What is it called?" "Bride's bonnet," I told her. Caleb smiled at the name. "We don't have this by the sea," she said. "We have seaside goldenrod, and wild asters, and woolly ragwort." "Woolly ragwort!" Caleb whooped. He made up a song. "Woolly ragwort all around, woolly ragwort on the ground. Woolly ragwort grows and grows, woolly ragwort in your nose." Sarah and Papa laughed, and the dogs lifted their heads and thumped their tails against the wood floor. Seal sat on a kitchen chair and watched us with yellow eyes. We ate Sarah's stew, the late night coming through the windows. Papa had baked bread that was still warm from the fire. "The stew is fine," said Papa. "Ayah," Sarah nodded. "The bread, too." "What does ayah mean?" asked Caleb. "In Maine it means yes," said Sarah. "Do you want more stew?" "Ayah," said Caleb. "Ayah," echoed my father. After dinner, Sarah told us about William. "He has a gray and white boat named Kittiwake." She looked out the window. "That is a small gull found way off the shore where William fishes. There are 3 aunts who live near us. They wear silk dresses and no shoes. You would love them." "Ayah," said Caleb. "Does your brother look like you?" I asked. "Yes," said Sarah. "He is plain and tall." At dusk, Sarah cut Caleb's hair on the front steps, gathering his curls and scattering them on the fence and ground. Seal batted some hair around the porch as the dogs watched. "Why?" asked Caleb. "For the birds," said Sarah. "They will use it for their nests. Later we can look for nests of curls." Sarah said later, "Caleb whispered to me as we spread his hair about, 'Sarah will stay.'" Sarah cut Papa's hair too. No one else saw, but I found him behind the barn, tossing the pieces of hair into the wind for the birds. Sarah brushed my hair and tied it up in back with a rose velvet ribbon she had brought from Maine. She brushed hers long and free and tied it back too, and we stood side by side looking into the mirror. I looked taller, like Sarah, and fair and thin. With my hair pulled back, I looked a little like her daughter, Sarah's daughter, and then it was time for singing. Sarah sang us a song we had never heard before as we sat on the porch. Insects buzzing in the dark, the rustle of cows in the grasses. It was called Summer is Ikumen in, and she taught it to us all, even Papa, who sang as if he had never stopped singing. Summer is Ikumen in, Lude sing cuckoo. What is Sumer? Asked Caleb. He said it Sumer, the way Sarah had said it. Summer, said Papa and Sarah at the same time. Caleb and I looked at each other. Summer was coming. Tomorrow, said Sarah, I want to see the sheep. You know I've never touched one. Never? Caleb sat up. Never, said Sarah. She smiled and leaned back in her chair. But I've touched seals, real seals. They're cool and slippery, and they slide through the water like fish. They can cry and sing, and sometimes they bark. A little like dogs. Sarah barked like a seal. And Lottie and Nick came running from the barn to jump up on Sarah and lick her face and make her laugh. Sarah stroked them and scratched their ears, and it was quiet again. I wish I could touch a seal right now, said Caleb, his voice soft in the night. So do I, said Sarah. She sighed. Then she began to sing the summer song again. Far off in a field, a meadowlark sang too. Chapter 5. The sheep made Sarah smile. She sank her fingers into their thick, coarse wool. She talked to them, running with the lambs, letting them suck on her fingers. She named them after her favorite aunts, Harriet and Mattie and Lou. She lay down in the field beside them and sang, Summer is Ikumen in, her voice drifting over the meadow grasses, carried by the wind. She cried when we found a lamb that had died, and she shouted and shook her fists at the turkey buzzards that came from nowhere to eat it. She would not let Caleb or me come near. And that night Papa went with a shovel to bury the sheep, and a lantern to bring Sarah back. She sat on the porch alone. Nick crept up to lean against her knees. After dinner, Sarah drew pictures to send home to Maine. She began a charcoal drawing of the fields, rolling like the sea rolled. She drew a sheep whose ears were too big, and she drew a windmill. Windmill was my first word, said Caleb. Papa told me so. Mine was flower, I said. What was yours, Sarah? Dune, said Sarah. Dune? Caleb looked up. In Maine, said Sarah, there are rock cliffs that rise up at the edge of the sea, and there are hills covered with pine and spruce trees, green with needles. But William and I found a sand dune all our own. It was soft and sparkling with bits of mica, and when we were little we would slide down the dune into the water. Caleb looked out the window. We have no dunes here, he said. Papa stood up. Yes, we do, he said. He took the lantern and went out the door to the barn. We do? Caleb called after him. He ran ahead, Sarah and I following, the dogs close behind. Next to the barn was Papa's mound of hay for bedding, nearly half as tall as the barn, covered with canvas to keep the rain from rotting it. Papa carried the wooden ladder from the barn and leaned it against the hay. There, he smiled at Sarah, our dune. Sarah was very quiet. The dogs looked up at her, waiting. Seal brushed against her legs, her tail in the air. Caleb reached over and took her hand. It looks high up, he said. Are you scared, Sarah? Scared? Scared, exclaimed Sarah. You bet I'm not scared. She climbed the ladder, and Nick began to bark. She climbed to the very top of the hay and sat, looking down at us. Above, the stars were coming out. Papa piled a bed of loose hay below with his pitchfork. The light of the lantern made his eyes shine when he smiled up at Sarah. Fine, called Papa. Fine, said Sarah. She lifted her arms over her head and slid down, down into the soft hay. She lay laughing as the dogs rolled beside her. "Was it a good dune?" called Caleb. "Yes," said Sarah. "It is a fine dune." Caleb and I climbed up and slid down, and Sarah did it 3 more times. At last Papa slid down too, as the sky grew darker and the stars blinked like fireflies. We were covered with hay and dust, and we sneezed. In the kitchen, Caleb and I washed in the big wooden tub, and Sarah drew more pictures to send to William. One was of Papa, his hair curly and full of hay. She drew Caleb sliding down the hay, his arms like Sarah's over his head, and she drew a picture of me in the tub, my hair long and straight and wet. She looked at her drawing of the fields for a long time. "Something is missing," she told Caleb. "Something." And she put it away. "Dear William," Sarah read to us by lantern light that night, "sliding down our dune of hay is almost as fine as sliding down the sand dunes into the sea." Caleb smiled at me across the table. He said nothing, but his mouth formed the words I had heard too. Our dune.